In my past life, I was Sophia's personal simp, taking the blame and going to prison for 10 years for her. On the day I was released, she and her new boyfriend laughed at me from their sports car and said, "You're really useful." When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day she asked me to help her cheat. This time I threw the note into the trash. "No, cheating will get you punished." She froze, and the whole class erupted in murmurs. Later I focused on starting my business, but she sent messages every late night. "What's wrong with you?" The wealthy, beautiful class beauty also took the initiative to ask me out. "Ethan, want to collaborate? I think you're very interesting." Sophia was completely panicked and stopped me in front of everyone. "You weren't like this before?" I laughed. The old me already died in prison. I opened my eyes. Above me was a pale fluorescent light. The air smelled of chalk dust and old wood. A rough exam paper pressed under my elbow, the printed characters a little blurred. The pen tip of my fingertips, carrying a strange sense of reality. I was stunned for a few seconds. Then I saw Sophia. She was sitting just to my left front, wearing that blue and white school uniform jacket, her ponytail loosely draped over her shoulder. The exam papers had been handed out. She didn't start writing, her fingers moving lightly under the desk. My breath caught. The invigilating teacher was an old man with glasses, hands clasped behind his back as he paced by the podium. His gaze swept the classroom like a searchlight. Sophia, taking advantage of his turn toward the blackboard, quickly shifted sideways. A piece of paper folded into a small square slipped from her palm and landed precisely on the scrap paper I had spread out. Her movements were disturbingly practiced. I looked down. The note lay quietly beside my Jia character. The paper was coarse, the creases deep. In my previous life, it was I who had taken this note, copied onto it the answer I had worked out with all my effort, and spent the next 10 minutes, my heart in my throat, desperately looking for a chance to pass it back. Then I was caught. The note fell out of my hand. When the teacher demanded answers, Sophia snapped her head around, her eyes wide open, filled with panic and innocence. She didn't say a word, but those eyes spoke louder than anything. I took the blame. I said I'd asked a copy from her. The disciplinary notice was posted in the most prominent spot on the bulletin board. Senior year, Class 7. Ethan, cheating on an exam, serious circumstances, given a demerit, public reprimand for the whole school. The red stamp looked like a scar. That was only the beginning. Later, that brawl. Brandon from the class next door, the jock who was always orbiting Sophia, blocked me with his crew. In the chaos, someone picked up a brick. Brandon went down, his head hitting the curb, blood everywhere. Siren wails tore through the night. Sophia wept with rain-streaked tears, clutching my sleeve. "Ethan, what do we do? Will he die?" I didn't mean it. I really didn't know he'd bring people. "Ethan, please help me. I'm scared." I looked at her trembling lips, her pale face. My mind was filled with the way she usually smiled at me, though that smile rarely truly reached her eyes. I said I hit him. 10 years. The best 10 years. The day I got out of prison, the sun was beautiful, painfully bright. I stood outside the prison gate, carrying a shabby canvas bag, a bit at a loss. Then I heard the roar of a sports car. A red sports car, top down, came to a sudden stop in front of me, kicking up a cloud of dust. Sophia was sitting in the passenger seat. She wore delicate makeup, her hair styled in big waves, reclining against the seat back with a cup of milk tea in her hand. The driver was a man I didn't know, wearing a floral shirt and sunglasses. When Sophia saw me, she raised an eyebrow and smiled. It was an easy, even slightly teasing smile. She took a sip of her milk tea and said something to the man beside her. The man smiled too, took off his sunglasses, and appraised me from head to toe, as if looking at an object. Then Sophia turned back, waved at me, and her voice carried through the noisy street. "Ethan, thanks. You're really useful." The sports car suddenly sped up, exhaust mixed with dust, slamming into my face. I stood in place, not moving for a long time. That breath was stuck in my chest, choking and aching, finally turning into something cold and dead silent, sinking to the bottom of my heart. My fingers touched the note. It was icy, On the podium, the proctor cleared his throat and began to pace again, walking toward the aisle on our side. Sophia didn't turn her head, but the hand she had under the desk waved gently in my direction, urging me on. Time seemed to stretch. I could hear my own heartbeat thump, thump, thump. I could also hear the scratch of pens across paper in the classroom and the faint sound of a ball being dribbled on the distant playground. Scenes from my past life. Exhaust from sports cars, her smiling face as she said, "You're really useful," the cold iron bars of the prison, and even earlier, the perfunctory smile she occasionally tossed my way. All those images twisted together into a coarse rope, tightening around my throat. The teacher stepped closer. 3 more steps. I pinched that slip of paper. Sophia's silhouette seemed to relax a little. Then I raised my hand, neither slipping it into my pocket nor unfolding it. My arm extended beyond the edge of the desk toward a blue plastic trash bin on the corridor side. The proctor's footsteps stopped. A few students in the front row seemed to notice something and slightly turned their heads. My fingers relaxed. That small paper square, which had carried the humiliation and foolishness of my past life, traced a short arc and fell into the trash can. There were only a few discarded scrap papers in the bin. The note landed with an almost inaudible, faint thud. But in that instant, I felt the whole classroom fall silent. Even the sound of pen tips scraping on paper had disappeared. Sophia spun around abruptly. There was still a trace of the expectant, self-assured expression on her face, but her beautiful eyes quickly filled with astonishment and disbelief. She looked at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. The proctor hurried over, frowning. "What happened? What did you throw?" I raised my head to meet his gaze and met Sophia's stare fixed on me. My voice wasn't loud, but in the overly quiet classroom, it was clear enough. Nothing. A scrap of paper. The teacher looked at me suspiciously, then at the trash can, and finally his gaze swept over Sophia, whose face was starting to go pale. He didn't ask further. He just rapped my desk sternly. "Focus on the exam. No messing around." He walked back with his hands behind his back. Sophia still turned her head to look at me. Her lips moved as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, no sound came out. Her face went from pale to red, then from red to sullen. In the eyes that always carried a touch of nonchalance or faint superiority, there appeared for the first time a clear fluster and a sense of offended anger. She glared at me fiercely, then turned her head back. She did it with such force that her ponytail whipped up. I lowered my head and looked at my test paper. The first question was a function multiple choice problem. Fx equals. Math had always been my headache. But now, these symbols and numbers somehow looked a little familiar. I picked up my pen and began to analyze the question. My mind was unusually clear. The memories of high school knowledge worn away by 10 years in prison seemed, with this absurd rebirth, to have been partly formatted and reinstalled. Not exactly mastery, but the basic lines of thought remained. More importantly, I knew what would happen in the world over the next 10 years. Bitcoin, mobile payments, the short video boom, a few critical moments in the stock market, and several local old neighborhoods slated for demolition, along with the real estate that later skyrocketed. My heartbeat gradually steadied, but my blood flowed faster. A feeling I'd never experienced before wrapped around me. Not excitement, not anger, but a cold, solid certainty. In this round, I had just flipped over my cards, but I already knew the whole cards. The bell signaling the end of the exam rang. The silence in the classroom was instantly broken. Whispers, the scraping of chairs and desks, and shouts comparing answers filled the air. I calmly organized my stationery and test paper, then stood up. I had just reached the door when someone grabbed my arm. They gripped hard. Their nails almost dug into my flesh. It was Sophia. She stood in front of me, chin lifted, the rims of her eyes a little red. Whether from anger or from feeling wronged, I couldn't tell. A few classmates nearby slowed their steps and stole glances our way. "Ethan," she hissed, lowering her voice, but the heat in it couldn't be hidden. "What do you mean by this?" I looked at the hand gripping my arm. Fair, slender, coated with clear nail polish. I used to think that hand was really pretty. Now I only thought its grip was strong. What do you mean? I asked. The note, she ground out. Why did you throw it away? Do you even know that I know. I cut her off and wrenched her hand from my arm. The movement wasn't gentle. You wanted me to help you cheat. She probably didn't expect me to say it so directly. She froze for a moment, her face growing even redder. I just have a few questions I'm not sure about, and wanted to check them with you. That's called cheating, I said, looking at her. If you get caught, you'll be punished. The whole school will be notified. But it never used to be a problem, she blurted out. Yeah, it didn't used to be. I used to be that fool. The one who would be sent running by a few sweet words and a few smiles from her, willingly taking on all the risks. The past is the past, I said. Not anymore. Her chest heaved with anger, those always glossy eyes of hers now wide and round. Ethan, are you out of your mind? Did you do it on purpose? To embarrass me in front of the teacher. The teacher didn't see the note, I said calmly. He only saw me throw away a scrap of paper. If you hadn't been staring at me the whole time, he wouldn't have noticed at all. Her words left her momentarily at a loss for words. More and more classmates gathered nearby to watch. Sophia was the class beauty. You could even call her schoolflower level, and wherever she went, she was the center of attention. Now she looked flustered and a little disheveled as she grabbed me. It was hard not to draw notice. She clearly realized that too. Her face showed she was losing face, but she wasn't willing to let me go that easily. You've changed. She looked at me with a complicated expression, anger, bewilderment, and a faint, hard-to-detect curiosity. You wouldn't have treated me like this before. She used to say that often, when I hesitated occasionally or couldn't immediately meet her demands. Every time she said it, accompanied by that little look of disappointment, it always made me feel guilty, and then I would try twice as hard to please her. I gave a light laugh. People change, I said, especially after realizing some things aren't worth it. Without looking at the expression that froze on her face, I turned, pushed through the onlookers, and walked toward the stairwell. From behind came her higher-pitched, trembling shout. Ethan, stop right there. I didn't stop. My footsteps landed on the concrete stairs, producing a hollow echo. The setting sun slanted in through the window at the end of the corridor, stretching my shadow long. Stepping out of the teaching building, a clamorous swell of voices hit me. Boys were running and shouting on the basketball court. The snack shop doorway was crowded. The air carried the smell of the plastic track warmed by the sun and the scent of youthful sweat. I took a deep breath. The taste of freedom, mixed with dust and sunlight, a little choking, but incredibly real. Hey, Ethan. Another voice came from the side. I turned. It was Olivia from our class. She was pushing a light purple bicycle, standing in the shadow of the plane tree. Her family seemed well off. I heard her parents were in business. Her usual dress wasn't like the other girls, not flashy, but the details showed they weren't cheap. Her grades were average, but she was well-liked and a bit blunt. She had an ordinary relationship with Sophia. Or rather, Olivia kept a certain distance from the boys and girls who orbited around Sophia. The exam room earlier was pretty tense. She pushed the card over, her face without any particular expression, just stating a fact. What? I didn't react for a moment. Notes. Trash can. She was concise, then tilted her head. Not like your usual style. I looked at her. Olivia was pretty too, but in a different way. Her features were grand and clear, her eyes bright, and when she looked at someone, she was very focused. Not like Sophia. Sophia's beauty carried a delicate quality that needed to be cherished and examined closely. People can't always have the same style, I said. She seemed to smile, a faint one. True. She swung on her bike. Let's go. She pedaled a few times. The wheels ground against the pavement with a staccato sound. A few meters down, she suddenly stopped with one foot on the ground and glanced back at me. By the way, I heard that the old neighborhood near your house might be redeveloped. I felt a slight stir in my heart. The news traveled this fast? Or did Olivia's family actually have some connections? Who did you hear that from? I asked. My dad mentioned it at the dinner table. She didn't say more. Let's go. This time she really rode off, her ponytail swaying gently behind her. I stood where I was, watching her receding figure. Olivia, in my previous life, I hardly ever interacted with her. I only knew that she seemed to go abroad later. Her father was an industry or an investment. These things aren't important for now. What matters is that she knows that Old District might be slated for relocation. That means the memory I have of the area, that demolition and generous compensation plans would begin shortly after the college entrance exams, is very likely true. Seed money. There's a lead. The following few days were calm and peaceful, at least on the surface. Sophia didn't speak to me again. If we ran into each other in the hallway, she either pretended not to see me or coldly looked away. But the girls hanging around her always looked at me oddly, with a mix of scrutiny and whispered gossip. The atmosphere in class was awkward too. The exam hall incident had clearly spread. The versions varied, but the core was the same. Ethan had rejected Sophia and even tossed a note. This was unprecedented in my 3-year bootlicker career. So people thought I finally stood up for myself. But more people, especially those boys who had mocked me openly or secretly before, looked at me with a different meaning, as if they were waiting to see when I would return to form or when I would get what was coming to me. Brandon was one of them. He was a sports specialist, big and burly, seemed to have some background at home, and was pretty domineering at school. He had always been into Sophia and regarded me as a thorn in his side. He used to pick on me a lot, but since Sophia would occasionally stand up for me, though that kind of defense was more like a declaration of her ownership, he never went too far. But it's different now. On Friday afternoon after school, I packed my bag to go home. Just as I stepped out of the classroom's back door, someone shoved my shoulder hard. The force was strong. I staggered and slammed into the corridor wall. Brandon, with 2 guys who practiced sports with him, blocked my way. He crossed his arms and looked down at me from above, a cocky smile on his face. Sure, Ethan. He grinned. Growing a backbone? You dare turn your back on Sophia? I straightened, patted the shoulder that had hit the wall, looked at him. In my previous life, because of him, I sat in prison for 10 years. Although I wasn't the one who directly acted, that helplessness and rage from being framed and pulled into it now surged up clearly from the depths of memory. But this time I was very calm. Something wrong? I asked. Brandon probably didn't expect that reaction. He froze for a moment, then his smile turned a little vicious. What are you playing at? On exam day, you made Sophia lose face, thinking that was the end of it. I already explained the exam thing to her, I said. It has nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with me. Brandon stepped forward, almost pressing up against me. He smelled of sweat and sporty cologne. What happens to Sophia is my business. You make her unhappy, I'll make you unhappy. Got it. 2 guys behind him closed in as well, forming a ring. Classmates still walking down the hallway glanced over, but no one dared come closer. I looked at Brandon's face, close enough to touch. Young, arrogant, carrying an audacity that had never met real setback. In my previous life, it was that very attitude that lured me to that alley. What do you want? I asked. Simple. Brandon reached out and poked my chest with his finger. First, go apologize to Sophia properly and mean it. Second, stay away from her from now on. Go out of your way when you see her. Understand? His finger was firm, poking my chest until it felt tight. I didn't move, nor did I brush his hand away. What if I don't? I asked. Brandon's expression cooled. Don't. He snorted. Then don't blame me for being rude. Ethan, you know your family situation. If this really blows up, he'll end up worse off. You know that in your heart. He was threatening me, with his family's little influence and his build. I was silent for a few seconds. The corridor was very quiet, with only the sounds of our measured breaths and faint distant noise. Then I nodded. Fine, I said. A look of triumph appeared on Brandon's face, as if he thought I had backed down. The 2 boys behind him relaxed as well, breaking into satisfied smiles. Consider yourself sensible. Brandon didn't finish his sentence. As I nodded, my right hand curled into a fist. With all my strength and without warning, I drove it hard into his bridge of the nose. Click! A dull thud, followed by the distinct, teeth-grinding sound of bone cracking. Brandon's smugness froze on his face, instantly twisted by violent pain. He let out a short, inhuman scream, clutched his face, and staggered backward. Blood gushed from between his fingers, splattering onto his white sports t-shirt. Shocking to behold. The two boys behind him were completely stunned, standing dumbfounded and unable to react for a moment. I didn't stop. After the punch, I took advantage of the moment to grab Brandon's arm, swinging from the pain, and jerked it down hard, while bringing my knee up and driving it viciously into his lower abdomen. Brandon gave a muffled groan, his body folding like a shrimp as he clutched his stomach and sank to his knees. He couldn't even scream, only letting out pain gasps. The whole thing took only a few seconds. By the time the two boys reacted and lunged at me with shouts, I'd already stepped back twice and put distance between us. I was panting, my heart pounding violently in my chest, my fists burning with pain, my knuckles probably scraped. But a rush of exhilaration surged up my spine to the top of my head. The resentment I'd been repressing for 2 generations seemed to dissipate a bit with those 2 blows. Fuck! How dare you hit Brother Brandon? Get him! The 2 athletes charged from left and right, fists slicing through the air. I didn't try to fight them head on. I know my limits. Those 2 blows earlier were unexpected, fueled by that pent-up viciousness. If I went toe-to-toe with 2 trained athletes, I wouldn't stand chance. I suddenly crouched, dodging the punch coming from the left while kicking out to trip him. The boy on the left lost his balance, lunged forward, and nearly fell. The punch from the one on the right was already in front of me. I turned my head to avoid it. The fist brushed past my ear, scraping painfully. I took the chance to grab his wrist and twisted it hard in the opposite direction. He cried out in pain as his arm was forced behind his back. I shoved him forward, crashing into Brandon, who was struggling on the ground and trying to get up. The 2 of them tumbled into a heap. The boy on the left steadied himself, then lunged again. I yanked something out of the side pocket of my backpack. Not a knife, but a thick stack of freshly handed out mock exam papers with razor-sharp edges. I hurled them hard at his face. The sheets fanned out, rustling loudly, blocking his view. He reflexively waved his hand to block it. Taking the opportunity, I turned and ran. Not toward the school gate, but toward the faculty office on the other side of the teaching building. I knew that at this hour, some teachers hadn't left work yet. Stop, Ethan, you fucking idiot, you want to get yourself killed. The shouts and pursuing footsteps behind me grew closer and closer. I ran with all my might. My lungs felt like they were going to explode. The corridor walls sped past. The sign for the teacher's office building was right ahead. Just as I was about to reach the office door, an angry roar came from behind. It was the boy whose wrist I had twisted, who had caught up and launched a flying kick at my back. I was hurled forward and fell to the ground, sharp pain stabbing through my elbow and knee. But I also used the momentum from my forward lunge to slam open the slightly ajar office door with the sign, Senior Grade Advisor's Office. Bang! The door hit the wall with a loud bang. Inside the office, several teachers who had been bent over marking papers or preparing lessons looked up in astonishment. I fell to the floor at the doorway, gasping for breath, and lifted my head. The 2 boys chasing me skidded to a stop at the doorway when they saw the room full of teachers, their faces instantly going pale. Brandon clutched his still bleeding nose, aided by the other boy, and staggered to the doorway. He froze when he saw the scene in the office. The office was deathly silent. The grade head, a middle-aged female teacher with black-rimmed glasses and a stern expression, slowly put down the red pen in her hand and stood up. What's going on? Her voice was not loud, but it carried a chilling authority. I propped myself up on my arms and slowly climbed to my feet. My elbow was scraped and burning with pain, but I stood up straight, facing the teacher and the 3 of them. Brandon among them, at the doorway with sullen faces. Teacher, I said after catching my breath, my voice a little hoarse but very clear. Brandon and the others blocked me after class, threatened me, and tried to hit me. You're talking rubbish. Brandon clamped a hand over his nose, his voice muffled and seething with rage. You started it. You attacked me first. Why would I start it? I turned to him. Because you cornered me, threatened me, told me to stay away from Sophia, and demanded I kneel and apologize. I refused, so you planned to be rude to me. You said those words, didn't you? I wasn't the only one who heard them. The boy who was supporting Brandon's face changed, instinctively wanting to retort, but he glanced at the teachers in the office and didn't dare make a sound. You're talking nonsense. Brandon trembled with anger, more blood welling from his nose. Teacher, he's slandering me. Look how he beat me. He pointed at his face, smeared with blood. He did look miserable. The head of the grade swept his gaze over the few of us and finally rested on my hand. What's wrong with your hand? I spread my hands. The knuckles on my right hand were scraped, seeping thin lines of blood and a bit swollen. It was left by the punch I threw at Brandon. He pushed me first, slammed me into the wall. I pointed at Brandon. Then he jabbed my chest with his finger, threatened me. I pushed him away. Maybe I used a little too much force. Just push him away. A young male teacher frowned, looking at Brandon's bloody nose. That injury isn't light. He was really close to me at the time, jabbed me hard. I kept my expression steady. I swung my hand to block it and might have accidentally hit him. My wording turned it from intentional assault into excessive self-defense, or even an accident. It was a stretch, but better than admitting I hit him on purpose. He's lying. Brandon screamed. He did on purpose. His fists. Brandon, the great head snapped, cutting him off sharply. Watch your attitude. This is an office. Brandon was left speechless, his face beet red, and with a bloody nose he looked ridiculous. You lot, the head teacher said sternly, skipping going home after school, gathering to fight. What do you think you're doing? Call all the parents. Teacher, they started it. Ethan, the head teacher cut me off too. You threw hands as well. Isn't it quite bad? Do you need to go to the infirmary first? Her words, seemingly concerned, actually had already judged the situation. Mutual fighting. I was silent for a moment, knowing that arguing over details further wouldn't be of much use. Teachers tend to prefer keeping the peace and blaming both sides equally. Also, the teacher might already know something about Brandon's family connections. No need. Teacher, it's just an external wound, I said. Everyone go to the infirmary to get treated. The head of the grade ordered without leaving room for discussion. Then go back and write a self-criticism. Bring your parents in tomorrow. The college entrance exam is coming up, and instead of focusing on your studies, you're getting into these crooked matters. Unacceptable. In the end, Brandon and I, the three of us, were all ordered to go to the infirmary to have our wounds treated, and our parents were to be notified to come to the school the next day. Coming out of the office, Brandon stood a few steps away, staring at me with those bloodshot eyes, a comical strip of gauze on his nose, and said in a muffled voice, Ethan, this isn't over. I ignored him and walked straight on. I knew it wasn't over. Brandon wasn't the type to swallow a loss in silence. But I'm not afraid. Or rather, compared to the 10 years of my previous life, this little trouble on campus was nothing. I walked to the school gate. It was already getting dark. The streetlights came on one after another. I waited at the bus stop. My elbow and knee still hurt, but my heart was very calm, even a little hollow. A pale purple bicycle rode over slowly and stopped beside me. Olivia propped herself on one foot and looked at the scrape on my face and the bandage on my hand. It's pretty lively, she said. I said nothing. Brandon is not to be messed with, she said flatly. His dad has some connections with the principal. I know, I said. You know, and yet, she paused, but it's satisfying. With the way he acts, someone should have put him in his place a long time ago. He glänzte her. Under the streetlight, her eyes were very bright. Aren't you afraid of causing trouble? I asked. Trouble. She seemed to find the word a little amusing. What kind of trouble could there be? Fighting and brawling. The school will handle it. Besides, she glanced at me, you don't look like someone who's afraid of trouble either. The bus arrived. The car's here, I said. She nodded but didn't move. By the way, Ethan. What? I have a small company at home, and we're thinking of investing in some new media stuff. I saw that mini program idea you mentioned in IT class last time. It was rough, but the concept was interesting. She looked at me. After the exams, want to talk? Like a collaboration. I was stunned. IT class. That was something I tinkered with in my previous life because I was interested, something I casually mentioned in class. Very crude. She actually remembered? And cooperate? I don't know how to do anything. I was telling the truth. The little insight I had would be nothing in 10 years. You can learn. Olivia said casually. I think the way you see things is different. That's enough. The details can wait until after the exams. The bus doors opened, then closed, and it drove away. I didn't get in the car. Why find me? I asked. We had hardly spoken before. Olivia thought for a moment. I don't know, she said. Just a hunch. I felt like you. Weren't like they said. And she smiled, this time more noticeably. Anyone who dares to throw Sophia's note in the trash and dares to punch Brandon has to be a little different. She gave the bicycle a kick. Let's go. See you tomorrow. Remember to write this self-criticism. She rode into the deepening night. I stood where I was, the evening breeze blowing, bringing a chill. Olivia, cooperate? My phone vibrated. I took it out to look. It was a text message from a number with no saved name, but one I knew by heart. Sophia. The message was simple. Ethan, are you okay? Did Brandon do anything to you? A typical Sophia move. She first plays weak, expresses concern, and puts herself in a passive, innocent position. In my past life, texts like this would always soften my heart, make me think she still cared about me, and then I'd willingly do even more for her. Now, I just find it a little ridiculous. I didn't reply. I deleted the message immediately. I put my phone back in my pocket and looked at the city lights in the distance. The new road seemed to lie right beneath my feet. And some people, some things, should be left entirely in the past. The next day, both Brandon's parents and I were summoned to the school. My mother arrived. An ordinary textile factory worker, wearing work clothes washed until they'd faded, her face showing fatigue and panic. In the grade head's office, she kept apologizing to the teacher, while looking at the wounds on my face with concern, whispering to ask if I was in pain. Brandon's mother came too. Fashionably dressed, carrying a designer bag, speaking loudly, insisting I provoked him first and struck with cruelty, ruining her precious son, and demanding the school deal with me sternly, pay medical expenses and compensation for emotional distress. The grade head was pestered to the point of a headache and finally issued a resolution. Brandon and I must each write a 3,000-character self-criticism and publicly apologize at a class meeting. Given that both parties were injured and the incident occurred after school with controllable on-campus impact, no further disciplinary action would be taken. Medical expenses are to be covered individually. Brandon's mother was very dissatisfied with this outcome and kept shouting that she would go find the principal. The grade coordinator said with a stern look, Brandon's mother, we're aware of how your son usually behaves. Both sides are responsible for this incident. If you insist on making a fuss, we'll have to bring up the previous minor conflicts as well. With the college entrance exam coming up, that won't be good for the students. Those words were firm but soft. Brandon's mother's expression changed several times, but in the end she sulked and shut up, glared fiercely at my mom and me, and dragged the still resentful Brandon away. My mom let out a sigh of relief, thanked the teacher repeatedly, and pulled me out of the office. Once we were out of the teaching building, my mom looked at me and sighed. Ethan, how did you end up in a fight? And such a nasty one. If you end up with a criminal record, what will you do in the future? Mom, it's okay now. I cut her off. It won't happen again. Is it because of that Sophia? My mom hesitated and asked. She'd heard some of the rumors too. No, I answered crisply. It has nothing to do with her. It never will. My mom looked at me, her expression complicated, as if she felt something different about me. But in the end, she only sighed again. The college entrance exam is coming up. Focus on your studies. Don't think about anything else. Mom doesn't have any special skills to help you. You can only rely on yourself. I felt a bit choked up. I know. Mom, don't worry. After seeing my mom off, I returned to the classroom. As soon as I walked in, the usually noisy room fell silent for a moment. Countless eyes fell on me, curious, appraising, and schadenfreude-filled. Sophia sat her seat, head bowed over a book, but her back was very straight, and she didn't look at me. Brandon wasn't there. Apparently, he had taken leave to go to the hospital for a follow-up on his nose. I walked to my seat and sat down. No sooner had I sat than Mason, who was seated across an aisle, came over. He was known in class for prying into everything and always being well-informed. "Not bad, Ethan." He lowered his voice and gave a thumbs up. "You really busted Brandon's nose? I heard he needed several stitches." I said nothing. "You really stirred up a hornet's nest." Mason went on without waiting for an answer. "That kid Brandon never forgives an insult. Just you wait. He's definitely going to come after you." But he chuckled twice. "You stood your ground this time. A lot of people in class are secretly cheering you on. That guy Brandon's way too cocky." Also, he lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Sophia, the campus beauty, hasn't been herself the last couple of days. Someone saw her sneaking off to wipe her eyes. Think it's because of you." I opened the book. "I don't know." Mason had his fun spoiled, shrugged, and went back. The class bell rang. Life seemed to have returned to normal, but the undercurrents beneath the surface were palpable to everyone. I threw myself into my studies even harder. I knew the college entrance exam was the first stepping stone I had to seize right now. The advantage of being reborn wasn't so much in knowledge, but I knew which points were key and how to review more effectively. Besides, having been beaten down by society, I could settle my mind better than a real 18-year-old. Sophia still hadn't spoken to me, but the way she looked at me grew more and more complicated. Sometimes it was hurt, sometimes curious, and sometimes even a bit wronged, as if I had committed some enormous wrongdoing. She began to make a few small moves. For example, her eraser accidentally rolled to my feet. For example, when handing out homework notebooks, she would deliberately put mine on top and pass it to me. For example, when I went to get water during break, I would come back to find an unopened box of Band-Aids in the desk hole. In my previous life, I would have been overjoyed by these little tricks, thinking she had finally started to care about me. Now, I only feel bored. I kicked the eraser back. I took the homework book expressionlessly. The bandage I threw straight into the trash can at the back of the classroom. Each time, I could catch a glimpse with the corner of my eye of her momentary stiffened expression and the quick reddening around her eyes. There was more gossip in class. Everything was said. They said I was playing hard to get, that I had turned love into hatred, that I had gone completely mad. I plugged my ears and ignored them. Aside from studying, I began using every spare moment to run to the library and the school's computer lab. I devoured every bit of shallow knowledge about the internet, programming, and business models as if starving. I knew what the future looked like, but I needed tools to seize it. The principles of Bitcoin mining and the early trading platforms. The early operating models of social media. Ownership information and planning rumors about several key local plots. I was like a greedy sponge, voraciously absorbing information. And on a cheap notebook, I wrote down every key timeline and course of action I could remember. Olivia would occasionally come to me to discuss a few things. She genuinely seemed interested in my rough ideas, asking some incisive questions or adding industry information I didn't know. Her perspective and knowledge were indeed not like an ordinary high school student. A strange tacit understanding developed between us. We didn't talk about personal matters, only those vague yet full of potential ideas about the future. That day, the computer lab was sparsely populated. Olivia and I sat at adjacent computers looking up information. She suddenly asked, "About the demolition of the area near your home, you've heard about it, right?" My hands on the keyboard paused. "Heard a little about it. I heard the compensation package is pretty good." She looked at me. "What are you going to do?" "What can I do?" I kept typing. "Wait for notice, take the money." "And then," she pressed, "take the money and go to college? Or do something else?" I turned to look at her. "What do you think?" Olivia thought for a moment and said seriously, "If it were me, I'd set aside a portion and make some relatively safe investments. For example, that idea you mentioned last time about a local life info aggregation mini app. The concept is simple, but the timing seems right. Mobile is becoming more and more widespread. It needs money, it needs technical know-how, and it needs promotion even more, I said. Money, you'll have some soon. Technology, you can learn it or find someone who knows to collaborate with. Promotion, she smiled. I could try asking people at my dad's company or use a clumsy method and do grassroots marketing. Why help me? I asked again. Olivia was silent for a moment. I don't know. She gave that answer again. Maybe it's just that you're different from the others I know. You don't orbit Sophia, and you don't care what others think of you. You seem very clear about what you want, even if you don't yet know exactly how to get it. She paused. Also, I think you can get things done. That kind of intuition is rarely wrong. I didn't say anything. I felt a little stirred. Not because of her valuing me, but because of that pure, judgment-based approval in her words. That hadn't happened in the past 3 years. After the exams, I said, if the demolition compensation comes through, we'll talk specifics. Okay. Olivia agreed promptly. Just then, the door to the computer lab was gently pushed open. Sophia stood in the doorway. She was wearing a light green dress that made her skin look very pale. She saw Olivia and me sitting together, clearly froze for a moment, and her expression changed instantly. Olivia saw her too, raised an eyebrow, said nothing, and went back to looking at her screen. Sophia stood in the doorway, unable to come in or leave. Her gaze swept back and forth between Olivia and me several times before finally settling on my face. In that look was surprise, disbelief, a touch of betrayed anger, and panic. She bit her lip, said nothing in the end, and turned sharply to walk away. The hem of her skirt swung in a resolute arc. The door closed softly behind her. Olivia gave a light, low laugh. Looks like someone got anxious. I didn't respond. My fingers tapped the keyboard absent-mindedly. Anxious? Maybe. But it had nothing to do with me anymore. The last month before the college entrance exam flew by in an atmosphere that was taut on the surface, but seething underneath. Brandon's nose healed, but left a slight, barely noticeable crookedness. The way he looked at me was like a knife dipped in poison, yet surprisingly he didn't pick a fight anymore. Maybe his family had warned him, or maybe he was nursing some bigger scheme. Sophia became very strange. She stopped giving me any subtle hints and stopped trying to look at me with that plaintive expression. She grew quiet, even a bit sullen. Sometimes I could feel her staring at me from afar, and that gaze was deeply unsettling. She began texting me frequently. The messages ranged from the initial accusation, "What is your relationship with Olivia?" to later ones like, "Ethan, can we talk?" And more recently, they became some disjointed remarks. "Did I do something wrong before? Tell me, can I change? You weren't like this with me before." I didn't reply to a single one. I deleted them all. Until 3 days before the college entrance exam, a little past 10 at night, I received another message. "Ethan, I'm downstairs at your building. If you don't come down, I won't leave." I walked to the window and pulled back a corner of the curtain. Under the dim streetlight, Sophia really was standing there. Wearing a thin dress, arms folded, the night breeze lifting her hair, she looked somewhat pitiable. Every so often a neighbor passed below, casting curious glances. I lowered the curtain. My phone buzzed again. "I know you saw me. I just want to say a few words to you. After that, I'll leave." I stood in the dark for a moment. Then I put on my coat and went downstairs. Seeing me come out, Sophia's eyes brightened for an instant, then were soon clouded with moisture. She took 2 steps forward. "You finally agreed to see me." Her voice was choked. "What's the matter?" I asked. My tone was flat. My attitude seemed to sting her. She bit her lip, and tears really fell. "Ethan, what's wrong with you? Why did you suddenly become like this? Did I do something wrong? Tell me, I can change." She sobbed. "Weren't we okay before? You treated me so well. Why won't you even speak to me now? And you're so close to Olivia. Have you fallen for her?" I watched her cry. My heart was utterly unmoved. "No," I said. "Then why?" "No, why?" I cut her off. "I just find it boring." "Boring?" she repeated, as if she didn't understand the word. What do you mean boring? Between us, so many memories. You say it's boring and that's it. Memories? I looked at her. The streetlight cast trembling shadows across her face. Sophia. I called her full name for the first time. In those memories, is there anything you actually cared about? Was it me doing your homework for you every time? Was it me skipping breakfast to save money to buy you milk tea? Was it me being at your beck and call running errands? Or slipping notes to you during exams and ending up taking the punishment for you? Her sobbing stopped for a moment, a flicker of panic crossing her face. I didn't make you take the demerit. That was an accident. Accident. I laughed very coldly. Fine, even if that was an accident. What about after that? Brandon and his guys cornered me that time. Was that an accident? What did you say in front of him? Her face went instantly ashen. She took a small step back, eyes darting away. I don't know what you're talking about. You do. I stepped forward, my voice low, but each word like a nail. You've always known. You knew Brandon hated me. You knew he might pick on me. But you said nothing, maybe even hinted at something. After I got beaten, you ran over crying, "What should we do?" And I stupidly took all the blame on myself. No, I didn't, she screamed, tears flowing harder. Ethan, how can you think that about me? Am I that kind of person? Whether you are that kind of person isn't important. I took a step back, putting distance between us. What's important is that I don't want to be that kind of person anymore. The fool who was always on call, who let you take whatever you wanted, who took the fall when things went wrong. That person is dead. She trembled all over, staring at me, as if she were seeing my face clearly for the first time. So you left the note, attacked Brandon, ignored me, all because of this? You're getting revenge on me. Her voice sharpened. Revenge. I shook my head. You're overestimating yourself. I just figured out. Between us, it was never equal. I was the fool before and couldn't see it. Now that I can, I should cut my losses in time. Cut your losses in time? She repeated the phrase, then suddenly laughed, the smile somewhat twisted. Ethan, you make it sound so easy. 3 years. I got used to you being around, used to you treating me well. Now you say you've figured it out and want to take it all back? What do you take me for? What do you take me for? I shot back. A convenient, obedient tool? An ornament to showcase your charm? Or a scapegoat you can throw away when something goes wrong? I didn't, she retorted heatedly, but her conviction was clearly lacking. Do you have one? You know in your heart. I took a deep breath. Sophia, let's end it here. I won't hold the past against you, and you don't bring it up again.